NASCAR denied him a shot at Talladega, and the internet exploded. Fans were furious, debates were loud, and everyone had a strong opinion about whether the decision was fair or not. But in the middle of all that noise, almost nobody was paying attention to something far more significant happening at the exact same time. One of the biggest names in power sports was signing a multi-year deal to back his entire operation, and that deal goes much deeper than a logo on a race car. Understanding what it actually means changes the whole story completely. His real name is Garrett Mitchell. He is 31 years old, born and raised in Florida, and he built one of the most loyal audiences in the motorsports content world. Over 4.6 million subscribers follow him for one reason. He makes real, raw, high-energy content about cars, horsepower, and motorsports culture that mainstream media has always ignored. Burnout contests, drag racing, Crown Vic chaos, shop builds, track days, that is the world he created, and people showed up in massive numbers. But he is not just a content creator. 6 years ago, he bought a racetrack. DeSoto Speedway in Bradenton, Florida became the Freedom Factory, and that facility is now the beating heart of everything he does. He runs his own events there, the Freedom 500, the 2.4 Hours of Lemons, Crown Vic races, and that venue has turned into something genuinely unique in American motorsports. It is part racetrack, part content studio, part fan experience, and entirely his own. The NASCAR part of this story traces back to one person, the late Greg Biffle, a former NASCAR champion who Cletus met almost by accident. They both loved helicopters, they both loved Crown Vics, and they just started spending time together. Somewhere along the way, Biffle began teaching Mitchell how to actually drive a stock car. As Cletus described it, Biffle was an accidental mentor, someone who never planned to become his coach but ended up shaping his entire racing direction. Biffle died in a plane crash in December along with his wife, son, and daughter. It was a devastating loss, and Cletus has been open about how much weight that carries. Everything he is building right now is happening in the shadow of that grief, and it is fueling him forward rather than slowing him down. The racing resume matters before getting into anything else. Cletus has made 9 total starts across NASCAR-sanctioned racing. His ARCA debut at Daytona ended in a crash after 17 laps. His ARCA start at Talladega went considerably better, with a 10th place finish. His Truck Series debut at Daytona lasted just 5 laps before a crash ended his day. Then came Rockingham, and before that race even happened, Richard Childress Racing had already entered the picture. Ty Dillon, grandson of Richard Childress, was the one who brought the idea to the organization. The logic was straightforward. Cletus brings one of the most engaged social media audiences in motorsports, and RCR brings decades of racing infrastructure and engineering knowledge. When Cletus toured the RCR facility, he identified engine components by name, asked technical questions about camber and caster settings, and completely changed the energy in the room. Danny Lawrence, vice president at RCR, said plainly that he is not just a YouTube personality, he is actually a racer. At Rockingham, he had 4 spins, finished 32nd out of 38 cars, and ended up 6 laps behind the race winner. But he completed 244 of 250 laps without wrecking any other competitors, and earlier that same afternoon, he had finished 4th in the ARCA East event on the same track. After Rockingham, NASCAR reviewed the performance and made its decision. Cletus McFarland was denied approval to compete in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series race at Talladega Superspeedway. The announcement triggered an immediate and intense reaction across social media. NASCAR's executive vice president, John Probst, was clear about the reasoning. They wanted to see more experience before putting him in a superspeedway environment, and the process would be race by race going forward. Probst also addressed the financial side directly, stating that if this were only about clicks and dollars, the decision would have been easy, but that the priority was doing right by him as a driver and as a person. Cletus called it a kick in the nuts, but handled the situation professionally, and Probst acknowledged his response as that of a true professional. The fan frustration, however, is understandable. He finished the race. He avoided contact with other competitors. He scored a top 5 earlier that same day, and the viewership numbers make the situation even harder to ignore. The Rockingham broadcast drew over 1.1 million viewers, representing an 11% increase compared to the same race the previous year. Through the first 7 races of the 2026 season, the series was averaging 1.28 million viewers per race, up 3.6% year over year. The pattern is clear. When he is on the track, more people are watching. While NASCAR was making him wait, Polaris made their move. On April 7, 2026, Polaris officially announced a multi-year partnership covering his operations, content, Freedom Factory experiences, and fan engagement across the entire platform. Reed Wilson, president of Polaris Off-Road Vehicles, stated that they could not just watch from the outside and had to be part of what he was building. This is not a sponsorship in any traditional sense. Polaris is not buying ad time or getting a logo on a fire suit. They are being woven into the entire operational fabric of the business. Every corner of what Cletus does day to day now has a Polaris presence. The vehicles on the property, the content being filmed, the fan experiences at events, the off-road builds, all of it. Cletus surprised his Freedom Factory crew with brand new Polaris off-road vehicles as part of the launch, equipment the team will now use to run the facility and produce content. He also made the full switch away from Can-Am, bringing his entire garage into the Polaris ecosystem. There is also a personal thread running through this. Greg Biffle was already a Polaris partner before his death, and it was Biffle who introduced Cletus to the Polaris executives by bringing them to his property. In many ways, this partnership is another piece of Biffle's legacy continuing through the people he connected. From Polaris's perspective, the business logic is straightforward. They are not buying random eyeballs. They are plugging directly into a fan base that does not just watch but actively participates. These fans show up to the Freedom 500, they watch Crown Vic Chaos, and they tune into ARCA and NASCAR broadcasts that have approached 1 million viewers each time. Polaris is investing in an ecosystem, and that ecosystem is still expanding. Cletus has purchased a Pro-Late model from Port City Race Cars with a specific vision attached, launching his own Pro-Late model series that runs alongside his Crown Vic events, approximately 6 times per year. The infrastructure already exists through his internal team that runs the Crown Vic races, so adding another class is a natural extension. When you map everything out together, YouTube content, Freedom Factory operations, grassroots Crown Vic events, the new Pro-Late model series, ARCA starts, O'Reilly Series development, the RCR partnership, and now Polaris backing the entire structure, what you are looking at is a serious, layered motorsports business being constructed with real intention. Cletus has also been candid about his long-term goals in a way that shows genuine self-awareness. The original goal was the Daytona 500, but he now understands what it actually takes to get there, and he wants to develop himself into a driver capable of competing at a higher level beyond just making that one start. That is not the language of someone treating NASCAR as a content opportunity. That is someone who understands the gap between where he is and where he wants to be, and is building a real plan to close it. NASCAR denied him Talladega, and the story got bigger. Polaris signed him to a deal covering his entire operation, and the story got bigger. He bought a late model and started building his own series, and the story got bigger. Usually when a driver gets denied for a race, things quiet down. With Cletus McFarland, the opposite keeps happening, and that fact alone tells you something important about where all of this is heading.